Hello, cats and kitties. It's your friendly neighborhood headbanger, Terry here. We are in black and white. What does that mean? Of course, that means we're going to be doing true crime. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, because I'm just going to assume that you did. Today, we have got, we're going to do a case that is fairly well known if you're a true crime aficionado. He's not as well known as, say, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, the Night Stalker, one of those. But he is fairly well known if you are into true crime. And today we're going to talk about Edmund Kemper III, otherwise known as Ed Kemper, otherwise known as the co-ed killer or the co-ed butcher. Now, there's a lot to unpack with him, so I've got several pages of notes that I'm going to have to be referring to. And I've got some quotes from him, and I do not have a picture of him because my printer decided to die. Well, I don't know that it's dead, it's just not cooperating with me in any way, shape, or form. So, but there are many pictures of him on the internet, Edmund Kemper, that you can find, and there are also interviews with him on YouTube that you can find. So, if you want to know more about good old Ed, then you can certainly find information on him. He is pretty well known. Okay, got to put on the sexy glasses because, as I said, I have got a lot to read from. All right, let's start from the beginning, shall we? Kemper was born on December the 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California to Edmund Kemper Jr., since he's Edmund Kemper III. He was born to Edmund Kemper Jr., and I'm guessing on the name here, Clarnell. It's either Clarnell or Clarnell. That was his mom's name, Clarnell Kemper. He was the middle child. He had an older sister and a younger sister. His father was a World War II vet. He fought on the front lines, and then he tested atomic weapons. And then after he got out, he came back to California and he became an electrician, which Clarnell complained was a menial job. So, yeah. Ed Jr. would go on to say that Clarnell, he would go on to say that, and I'm quoting here, suicide missions in wartime and the atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to living with her. Wow. Also, he said that she affected him more than 396 days of fighting on the front did. Yeah, okay then. Back to Ed. Back to Ed the Third. Ed weighed 13 pounds at birth. Big boy. Very big boy. He was a head taller than all of his peers when he was about 4 years old, and he would eventually grow to be 6 feet 9 inches tall, well over 300 pounds. So, big guy. Big guy. He began exhibiting some troubling behavior at a pretty early age. At 10 years old, he buried the pet cat alive, and then after he was sure it was dead, he dug it up, decapitated it, and put its head on a spike. Now, that is very troubling, I know. It's going to get worse. He took a lot of satisfaction in being able to successfully lie to his family about what happened to the cat. He just really felt very good about himself that he could get away with that. In fact, he felt so good about it that he killed another family cat just because he thought that that cat was showing more affection and favor to his little sister than to him. Yeah, okay. So another odd thing he did during his childhood is he would play with his sister's dolls, and by play, I meant that he would cut their heads and hands off. He also liked to play games with his younger sister called electric chair and gas chamber. And he would want his sister to tie him up and pretend that he was tied to either an electric chair or tied up in the gas chamber. And then his younger sister would pretend to flip a switch, and he would fall over on the floor and jerk and, pretend like he was being electrocuted, and then he would, quote-unquote, die. So, yeah, okay. His older sister just did not have a whole lot of love for him in general. She tried to push him in front of a train. Then she pushed him into the deep end of a swimming pool where he nearly drowned, and she teased him about kissing his first grade teacher, to which Ed replied, "If I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first." Yeah, that's foreshadowing. He also admitted to peeping in at his second grade teacher, peeping in through her window while holding a bayonet. So, yeah, okay. Something significant happens to Ed in 1957. In 1957, his father, Ed Jr., and Clarnell divorce. And Kemper is very upset by this because he is close to his dad. He felt like he and his dad sort of shared a camaraderie with how Clarnell treated both of them. So, unfortunately, they will get, well, probably fortunately for them, they got divorced, but unfortunately for Ed. And Clarnell is going to move his sisters and he to, or him rather, to Montana, to Helena in Montana. And once they get there, Clarnell just gets even worse. She is an alcoholic. She becomes very domineering. She's very verbally and emotionally abusive to Ed. She makes fun of him because of his large size and the fact that he doesn't have many friends. She calls him a real weirdo, not to his face. She's actually talking to his father on the phone, but he overhears it. So he, it's even worse because she said it when she thought no one was listening. So it's probably how she actually feels, and he was really affected by that. She did not show him any physical affection because she was afraid she was going to turn him gay. And she kept him at night. She made him sleep in a locked basement because she was afraid that he would come upstairs and do something to his sisters, which, with the whole decapitation of the dolls thing and the whole gas chamber electric chair thing, not exactly an unfounded fear, but he was kept in a locked basement at night. And so that had definitely had an effect on him, and it had an effect on how he felt about his mother. When Kemper was 14, he ran away from home to live with his father in California, with Ed Jr. His father had remarried and had a stepson, and Kemper did not fit in well with the new family dynamic. Didn't fit in well with Ed Jr. and didn't really get along with the stepson, and he made Ed Jr.'s new wife nervous, justifiably so. So it was just determined that he couldn't stay there. So Ed's father sent him to go live with his paternal grandparents, Ed Jr.'s parents, in California, in a place called North Fork. North Fork is in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, so kind of out in the middle of nowhere on a ranch. And Kemper hated it there. Absolutely hated it there. He said that his grandfather was senile and that his grandmother was constantly emasculating, this is a quote, constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. So Ed seems to have an issue with women emasculating him, or he certainly seems to think they do. On August the 27th, 1964, when he was 15 years old, Kemper got into an argument with his grandmother, and the argument got pretty heated. So he got very angry, and he went off to find the rifle that his grandfather had given him to use for hunting. And he comes into the kitchen where they'd been arguing, and he sees his grandmother sitting at the kitchen table, and he shoots her once in the back of the head and twice in the back. Some accounts say that he stabbed her. They don't all say that, so I don't know if that's, true or not. When his grandfather got home from grocery shopping, Kemper shot him in the driveway by his car. And then he phoned his mom, and he said, this is what I've done. She told him to call the police and wait for them to come pick him up. And he did. Called the police and just sat there and waited. When he was arrested, he was asked, okay, why? Why did you do this? And he replied, quote, I just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma, end quote. He said that he shot his grandfather because he didn't want Ed Sr. to find out, Ed the First, rather, to find out that his wife had died, and because he was afraid that he was going to be angry, that Ed was going to be, his grandfather was going to be angry at him for shooting his grandmother. Probably so. Okay. Court psychiatrist examined Kemper, and they diagnosed him as having paranoid schizophrenia. And that is a diagnosis that will later be doubted and dismissed, simply because he doesn't have delusions or hallucinations or breaks with reality. So he probably does not have paranoid schizophrenia, but that's what they diagnosed him with. And they sent him to Atascadero, and I'm guessing on that pronunciation, Atascadero State Hospital, which is a forensic secure hospital for males, and it's for offenders with mental health problems. And at Atascadero, Kemper's IQ is tested, and it is an astonishing 136. Later testing of his IQ would show an IQ of 145, which is genius level. So very, very bright. Kemper was not found to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia once he got to Atascadero. He was re-diagnosed with personality trait disturbance passive-aggressive type. Now, I don't exactly know, even as someone who got their master's in human services counseling, I don't exactly know what they mean by that. He was a model prisoner, though, and he was even taught how to administer psychiatric testing to other inmates. Now, you gotta realize, this kid's 15, because he gets released from this place at 21. So this is between the ages of 15 and 21. So pretty bright guy. The knowledge of testing allowed Kemper to manipulate his psychiatrist when his testing came around, not to mention the fact he was just really, really smart. Psychiatrists said that he was a good worker, and that was not typical of a sociopath, that they would be a good worker that took pride in their work. On December the 18th, 1969, his 21st birthday, he is released to his mother, which, by the way, the psychiatrist absolutely said he should not be released to. All the psychiatrists there understood that he had a problem with his mother, said he should not be released to his mother, so what did? They released him to his mother. Clarnell had since married and divorced again, and she was living in an apartment near the University of California, Santa Cruz, because she worked there as an administrative assistant. In 1972, Ed's juvenile record was expunged, which basically meant that there's nothing on it now. It's like it never even happened. It's like he never even killed his grandparents. So one of the probation psychiatrists actually stated, and this is a quote, "If I were to see the patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be of danger to himself or any member of society." End quote. Hashtag irony. Okay, so while living with his mom, Kemper attended community college because that was a condition of his parole. He wanted to be a police officer. That was his true dream. But Big Ed, as they called him, was too large. His size prevented him from becoming a police officer, which you would think his size would be an asset, but apparently there is a cutoff point, and he was past it. But he accepted that they wouldn't, take him on the force, but he decided that he was going to become good friends with some of the members of the force anyway, and he hung out with them at a bar that they frequented called the Jury Room, and basically just, ingratiated himself into their social circle. Meanwhile, while this was happening, he had found steady work with the Department of the California Division of Highways, which is what now we would call the California Department of Transportation. And at home, though, things were not going so well. At home, things were as toxic as they ever had been. And in fact, Kemper said, and I quote here, "My mother and I started right in on horrendous battles. Just horrible battles, violent and vicious. I've never been in such a vicious verbal battle with anyone. It would go to fists with a man, but this was my mother, and I couldn't stand the thought of my mother and I doing these things. She insisted on it, and just over stupid things. I remember one roof raiser was whether I should have my teeth cleaned." There you go, if you're going to fight about something. All right, in 1972, Kemper bought a 1969 Ford Galaxy with money that he had gotten from a settlement from an accident that he had had. And he began picking up female hitchhikers, but he would let them go, took them to where they wanted to go and let them go. Meanwhile, he started putting a little kit together and keeping it in his car. It had plastic bags, knives, handcuffs, blankets. So, yeah, he began carrying this around in his car, not using it yet, but had it in the car. He said, by his estimation, that he picked up and let go 150 girls before his, and I quote here, little zappies, which are what he called his murderous sexual urges, before they begin to kick in. Between 1972 and 1973, Kemper killed 8 women. 6 of them were hitchhikers. He would pick up hitchhikers, he would take them to isolated areas, and then he would shoot, strangle, or smother them. Then he would take their bodies back to his home where he decapitated them, and he would violate the bodies and violate the heads of the victims. And I'm just going to let you figure out what I mean by violate, because I really don't want to spell it out. So after that, he would dismember them and get rid of the bodies. So now we're going to talk about the victims. I'm going to tell you their names, their ages, what school they were from, because they were almost all co-eds. All except one were college students. Okay, the first 2 victims that he kidnapped together were Mary Ann Pesce, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and Anita Lucchesa. They were both 18 years old. They were both from Fresno State, and this happened on May the 7th, 1972. They were stabbed and strangled. The next victim was Aiko Ku, 15 years old. She was a high school student. She was strangled unconscious, sexually assaulted, and then killed on September the 14th. Let's see, our next victim was Cindy Shaw, 18 years old, from Cabrillo College. She was shot. This was on January 7th of 1973. And then victims number 5 and 6 of the hitchhiker victims were Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Liu. They were 23 and 20, respectively. And they were from the University of California, Santa Cruz. They were shot, and this was on February the 5th, 1973. Now, by this time, Ed realized that people had noticed that women were going missing, that hitchhikers were going missing. Oddly enough, there was another serial killer that was at work at the same time that Ed was, and we'll probably go over him in a future episode, in a future video. But yeah, women were starting to get, a little bit concerned about getting in a car. And at the University of California, Santa Cruz, UCSC, they said they were telling women, do not get in a car that doesn't have a UCSC sticker. Well, guess what? Ed's mother worked for UCSC, so she had a sticker, and he was able to get one through her. So now he's traveling in a car that has a sticker, which is probably why Rosalind and Allison got in the car with him and thought they were safe. And obviously they were not. Some remains from his victims were found in Eden Canyon nearby, and others were found near Route 1, a nearby road. When asked why he decapitated his victims, Kemper would later go on to say, the head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy. The head is where everything is at. The eyes, the brain, the mouth, that's the person. I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. The body is nothing after the head is cut off. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head. Okay. When he said he was told that as a kid, it makes you wonder if he was told that at Atascadero when he was serving his time there with other mentally ill patients. Okay, on April the 20th, 1973, Clarnell, who was 52 by this time, came home after a party, and she was reading in bed. And Kemper enters the bedroom, and she says, oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now. And like it was just kind of a bother to her, And Kemper said, no, good night. And after Clarnell fell asleep, Kemper came back into her room and bludgeoned her to death with a claw hammer and then slit her throat with a penknife. And he decapitated her, he violated her head, yes, his own mother, and used it as a dartboard. Then he cut her tongue and larynx out and tried unsuccessfully to put them down the garbage disposal. And he would go on to say, quote, "That seemed appropriate as much as she bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years," end quote. So, yeah, definitely some mother issues there. A lot of rage coming out. After going to get a drink at a bar, like you do, he hid his mom's body in a closet and invited his mom's best friend, her name was Sally, she was 59 years old, he invited her over to dinner and watch a movie. I'm sure she thought that it was going to be he and his mother, Ed and his mother. When she got there, he strangled her to death, and then he put Sally's body in a closet, another closet, and left the following note for the police. And that note said, "Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I've got things to do." That was the end of the note. Kemper then drove for 1,000 miles to Pueblo, Colorado. He was popping caffeine pills as he went to keep himself awake. And when he found out, when he got to Pueblo, that he was not the focus of a national manhunt, which was kind of a surprise to him, he just decided to call the police and confess. So he called the police in Pueblo, and he confessed to everything. He confessed to, well, not to everything, just to his mom and Sally's murders. And the police didn't believe him. They were just like, no, that's crazy. So he literally had to call back a few hours later and tell them again, no, really, this is what I've done. He actually wound up speaking to someone that he knew, a cop that he knew, and told them, no, really, this is what I've done. You need to send the police to pick me up. So they did. And after they picked him up, he confessed to the 6 hitchhiking murders. And when asked why he quit and turned himself in, Kemper said, quote, "It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it any longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing. At the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, I just said to hell with it and called it off." A lot of experts think that by the time he killed his mother, that was just kind of the pinnacle of everything, and that he was done. Killing his mom just kind of, was the pinnacle of everything that he wanted to do. I don't know about that, but May the 7th, 1973, Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder. Remember, he's not being indicted for his grandparents' murder because he's already served time in a Tuscadero hospital for that. His counsel pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, 3 court-appointed psychiatrists found Kemper legally sane. Joel Fort, one of the court psychiatrists, said Kemper enjoyed the idea of being an infamous serial killer. And Kemper took the stand in defense of his insanity plea and tried to get the jury to believe that there were 2 Ed Kempers. There was a killer personality that took over and that he had no control over that. However, on November the 8th, 1973, a 6-man and 6-woman jury took only 5 hours to find him A, legally sane, and B, guilty on all counts. Kemper actually asked for death by torture, but there was a moratorium on the death penalty in California at the time. So there was no death penalty, so he wasn't going to get that. Not that he would probably have gotten death by torture anyway. Possibly death, but not death by torture. So Kemper got 8 life sentences to run concurrently. I found this interesting. Because they were running concurrently, he actually had a chance at parole. Yeah. I personally would have run them consecutively, and maybe there was a reason they couldn't run them consecutively. I don't know. But yeah, they were running concurrently, which meant he was serving them all at the same time instead of one after the other, which would be consecutively. So he was placed in the California Medical Facility at Vacaville, I'm guessing again, where he was in the same prison area as Herbert Mullen, who was the serial killer acting at the same time he was that I told you about. We'll probably do a video on Herbert Mullen. He was also there at the same time that Charles Manson was. So, interesting. Kemper is considered, and he's still there, by the way, Kemper is considered a model prisoner. He has been in charge of scheduling other inmates' appointments with psychiatrists. He makes ceramic cups, and apparently he's pretty good at it. And he has spent over 5,000 hours recording books for the blind. In fact, he was in charge of the audiobook program at the prison. In 2015, Kemper had a stroke, and that meant that he had to retire from doing audiobooks. He was disabled at that point and couldn't read them. Kemper has given numerous videos over the years, many. Some of them you can find here on YouTube. And you will realize that he is a very well-spoken and a very intelligent person. And he's inherently likable. You don't want to like him, but he's inherently likable. In fact, when he met with FBI profiler John Douglas, when they were starting to interview serial killers for the behavioral science unit in the FBI, he met with John Douglas, and John Douglas called him among the brightest and capable of rare insight for a violent criminal. And in fact, Douglas went on to say that he personally liked Kemper. Actually, he is an affable, interesting person. While in Vacaville, Kemper was once again given psychiatric testing and was found to have, and this is what I would agree would probably be the best diagnosis so far, narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Kemper was eligible for parole in 1979 for the first time. He was turned down. He's been eligible several times since then, always been turned down, and sometimes he even waives his right to a parole hearing. He doesn't even have a parole hearing. He will next be eligible for parole in 2024, so just about a year and a half from now. It's unlikely that he will be granted parole ever. He's almost 74 years old, and he's been in prison for 49 years, so he's probably not going anywhere. Kemper had a message to those who were struggling with homicidal urges. He had this to say in an interview, quote, there's somebody out there that is watching this and hasn't done that yet, hasn't killed people, and wants to, and rages inside and struggles with that feeling, or is so sure they have it under control. They need to talk to somebody about it. Trust somebody enough to sit down and talk about something that isn't a crime. Thinking that way isn't a crime. Doing it isn't just a crime, it's a horrible thing. It doesn't know when to quit, and it can't be stopped easily once it starts. Now, I want you to notice there at the end that he says it doesn't know when to quit. He's still not taking personal responsibility. He does in interviews, but you kind of wonder, is he really taking responsibility, or is he just saying, because of this, and this is the way I turned out? Obviously, big mother issues. Freud would have had a field day with Kemper. But that is the story of Edmund Kemper III. He is still in prison. Like I said, he's almost 74. He'll be 74 in December. And he's a very interesting case study in my mind because he is so intelligent. And he is well-spoken and likable. If you listen to him in his interviews, he is very conversational. He does kind of sound like mea culpa, like my fault, I'm sorry. But in the same vein, you can also tell he's really enjoying having these interviews and really enjoying talking about himself and really enjoying talking about the things that he did. So he is a classic sociopath and a narcissist in that it's all about him. And he doesn't talk about the victims. He just talks about him and what he did and how he was and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's Ed Kemper. Like I said, some of you guys probably knew who he was and you had heard of him before. If not, if you want to see a picture of him, because he's a big guy, there are pictures of him on the internet standing next to a prison guard, and he just towers over the prison guard. So I guess it's a good thing he's a model prisoner. All right, guys, I hope that you're staying safe and that you're well. I hope that you found this interesting. I always hate to say enjoyed, but that you found this interesting. There'll be another true crime, and let's see, I think the next video is going to be a ramble about long-term care and working with someone that needs long-term care, and then maybe another true crime after that one. All right, guys, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.